Hello everyone, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an easy and smart way of covering the newspaper for the civil service examination. We are going to discuss the Hindu Delhi edition dated 25th March 2020. The topic we'll be discussing have been tabulated on the screen. The time stamping for the same have been provided in the description section. This news has been taken from page number 6. It talks about collaboration among Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research and various ITIs to manufacture hand sanitizers. WHO also has given its own recipe to make homemade hand sanitizers in case they are in shortage in the market. You must have also heard of news of hand sanitizers going off the shelf in the shops because they are in limited supply. Overall, hand sanitizers are very much in news, and whatever is in news is important for the prelims exam. So in this discussion, we will be discussing hand sanitizers from the perspective of prelims examination, its protective mechanism against viral infection, and the other peripheral information that is important for the exam. However, the protective mechanism of soap water against viral infection has already been discussed in the DNS dated 15th March 2020. I'm hoping that you have done it, and that will make easy for us to discuss the protective mechanism of hand sanitizers. I have to, although very quickly, discuss the basic structure of the virus because understanding of the basic structure of virus is central to understanding the protective action of hand sanitizers. First of all, virus does not have its own DNA producing machinery. So the smart thing it does is to get into the host cell and use the machinery of the host cell. What effectively it does is reprogramming of the DNA of the host cell and convert it into its own DNA. So it doesn't produce its DNA, but it converts the DNA of the host cell, and for that reason, it is not considered as a living entity. Coming to the basic structure of the virus, there are three parts in the structure as you can see in this diagram. One is genetic material, which is either DNA or RNA. Virus does not have both. Then there is a protective protein coat called as caspid that protects the genetic material. And third, which is not found in all kind of virus, is an envelope of lipids. So there are two kind of viruses. One that has an outer layer of lipid called as envelope and one which is bereft of such an envelope. But both will have genetic material and protective protein coat called as caspid. The virus that has envelope are called as enveloped virus, and enveloped viruses, they can survive only under special conditions, mostly wet conditions that are found in respiratory droplets or other body fluids. However, the one that does not have envelope called as naked virus can survive under harsh conditions. They can survive under condition of very low pH, very high temperature, and they are very dangerous because dealing with them is extremely difficult. Our focus here is on virus that has envelope, the outer lipid layer. What function does it perform? They perform extremely important function. First and foremost, they protect the virus against host's immune system. Because the outer membrane are usually obtained from the host cell itself, so the immune system of the host does not recognize the virus because of the outer layer as an external entity. And hence the immune response for the first time is very, very weak. Secondly, there are receptors on the outer lipid layer which identify the host cell. Once host cell has been identified, then the virus has to be attached to the host cell. That is done through a center called as ligands. And those ligands are also on the outer lipid layer. And once they are attached to the host cell, what is required is to get into the cell membrane. And the outer membrane effectively gets infused into the cell membrane of the host cell. And that helps in putting out the genetic material of the virus into the cytoplasma and ultimately into the nucleus of the host. So you can see here, losing the membrane will effectively impair the virus. And the good news is coronavirus, with which the whole world is dealing presently, including COVID-19 virus, they have outer membrane. Now let's come back to the original question, how does hand sanitizers work? Or to put it differently, how does hand sanitizers break down the outer lipid layer of virus? Because if the outer lipid layer of the virus is gone, the virus is gone. It does it through two ways. One is called as denaturation. Denaturation is a process in which the entangled up structure of protein, suppose this is the structure of protein in which it is found, that gets break down. it gets break down into a simple linear structure. This process of converting the entangled up structure of the protein into a simple structure is called as denaturation. What will happen if denaturation happens? We have discussed just now that there are receptors, there are ligands on the outer lipid envelope of the virus that identifies and get attached with the host cell. And those functions are performed by the structure of the protein. If protein gets denatured, this structure is gone. If this structure is gone, then the action of receptor and ligand will also be gone. Effectively, virus will not be able to identify and get attached and get into the host cell. So effectively, virus will become benign. It will be impaired. The other way to do it is to dissolve the lipid envelope itself. If the lipid envelope gets dissolved, then everything attached to it, the protein molecules, the receptors, the ligands, everything is gone. And virus again will become impaired. However, at this juncture, you must understand the mechanism that we are discussing is concerning the viruses that have outer lipid structure. But this will not be effective if the virus does not have the outer lipid structure. For example, the viruses like norovirus, rotavirus, human papillomavirus, even the deadly poliovirus, they don't have the outer lipid structure. So in this case, hand sanitizers or mechanism like this won't work. And what you must also know is even for bacteria, hand sanitizers are good, not only for virus. Bacteria, you would be knowing, has cell wall, unlike virus, and these cell walls protect the bacteria from external structure. But alcohol and hand sanitizers protrudes deep into this cell wall and breaks it open. Once the cell wall is broken, the bacteria cannot survive. Antiviral protection of hand sanitizers that we have discussed will be effective only if the concentration of alcohol in the hand sanitizer is at least 60%. So now would be the good time for you to check the percentage of ethanol in your hand sanitizers, because if that is very less, 30% or so, the hand sanitizer will not be effective. So finally, we have understood what we intended to understand, the protective mechanism of hand sanitizers against viral infection, how it does it. However, using soap water is multiple times better than using hand sanitizers. First, it also gets rid of dirt and the grease and the fat and the oil that is there in the hand. Secondly, because of the long chain that it has, it is very effective in opening and tearing apart the lipid layer in the virus. So, preference must be given for hand washing using soap water rather than hand sanitizers. This is the lead article taken from page number 10. It has been titled Ironing Out Wrinkles in India's Pandemic Response. Recently, due to the outbreak of COVID-19, the health infrastructure of developed countries has been tested. And they have been struggling to reduce mortality rates due to COVID-19. In this context, author raises some critical questions in context of India, especially when public health expenditure is just 1.3% of GDP. Author raises questions like, is India's healthcare system well equipped to deal with the outbreak of COVID-19? Do we have enough number of healthcare professionals for a situation, God forbid, if the COVID-19 cases increases exponentially instead of flattening in near future? You obviously know that the answer is no, a big no. But you'll have to learn how to present your answer. Because health and education are two topics that UPSC never missed to ask in the mains exam. India's healthcare infrastructure is quite poor as compared to other countries which have got high number of COVID-19 cases, and it has been pictorially represented here. If you compare a few parameters with China and Italy, the two hotspots of COVID-19, you will see that India stands poorly. For example, number of hospital beds per lakh population in India is just 70, compared to 340 in Italy and 420 in China. Number of ICU beds per lakh of population is just 2.3, compared to 12.5 of Italy, 3.6 of China. Similarly, other numbers like number of qualified doctors per thousand people in India is 3.4, and number of nurses per thousand population is 3.2, which are very low compared to the numbers of Italy and China. But you have to remember here that 1.34 is still higher than the recommendation of WHO, which is 1 per thousand population. India achieved the number 1.34 in 2017. There is just one sample testing center for every 12 crore people. And there are huge disparity in availability of healthcare workers. They are mainly concentrated in urban areas and there are interstate disparity. For example, Bihar has just zero point 0.3 number of doctors per thousand population compared to 1.5 of Kerala, compared to almost 4 of Tamil Nadu. So it's all pictorially represented here that India's healthcare infrastructure is not in good shape. There are important recommendations given by the author in the article to beef up India's healthcare infrastructure to deal with any calamity that can come up due to COVID 19. First and foremost is to expand the existing healthcare infrastructure. See, we need to put in place a strategy to ramp up hospital and ICU capacity as well as essential equipment such as ventilators and personal protective equipments for hospital workers. However, unlike China, we may not be in position to construct new hospitals and staff them within short period of time. Hence, we need to find alternatives, such as extending the capacity of present running hospitals and some innovative measures like converting university dormitories into treatment centers. We also need to leverage private sector enterprises, as country's healthcare system is highly privatized. And most of the country's healthcare capacity in terms of human resources, hospital beds, laboratories, diagnostic centers are in private sector. So we need to leverage the private sector enterprise in planning and coordinating the response to COVID-19. For example, 2 days back, L&T, Larsen and Turbo, they offered to construct small-scale hospitals very quickly throughout the hotspots of COVID-19 in the country. Multi-skilling of healthcare workers is essential. It is quite difficult to increase India's healthcare force within short period of time. Hence, there is need for multi-skilling of existing healthcare workers, wherein Ayush doctors, nurses, ASHA workers, they are engaged along with general and specialist doctors. It is essential to focus on COVID-19 hotspots because certain areas are likely to be more infected due to the COVID-19 virus than others, for example, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, where there are frequent travelers and travelers from foreign nations. One of the very important recommendations given by the author is contact tracing through primary healthcare workers. Countries such as South Korea and Singapore have been successful in containing COVID-19 due to contact tracing. Contact tracing is a process of identifying and monitoring the health of people who have come in close contact with infected people. India needs to focus on contact tracing by leveraging the primary healthcare workers such as registered medical practitioners, auxiliary nurses, midwives, ASHA workers, etc. The author also stresses on the safety of health workers. See, in countries like China and Italy, large number of health workers have been affected. Either they are infected or they have even died while working with COVID-19 patients. And they also face enormous amount of physical and mental exhaustion. Today in newspaper it was mentioned that landlords are asking the tenants who are working in the AIMS with COVID-19 patients to evacuate their flat. This is mental torture, mental trauma that they are going through. So their safety is also very important, especially for a country like India, because we are already facing shortage of health workers. So safety of health workers has to be taken into account by procuring and ensuring widespread use of personal protective equipments like masks, gloves, gowns, earwears. So these are some of the recommendations which are important for the mains exam that you have to keep in mind. This article is from page number 11. It has been titled The Race to Find a Cure for COVID-19. COVID-19 is an absolute disaster for the world. This article discusses how far we have come in developing a vaccine and drug for COVID-19, and it also discusses the precautionary measures that we should adopt in development of such a vaccine. Let's look at some of the statistics that shows the scale of the disaster. More than 4 lakh people have been infected by COVID-19 worldwide. Doubling time is rapidly reducing. For instance, it took 67 days for coronavirus to infect 1 lakh people. And then it took 4 days for the number to go from 1 lakh to 2 lakh. And 4 days to go from 2 lakh to 3 lakh. And only 2 days to go from 3 lakh to 4 lakh. The mortality is also very high in case of coronavirus. More than 17,000 people have died across the world. The epicenter is rapidly changing. Initially, it was Wuhan in China, and now it's the Western nation, mostly Italy and United States. And the impact on developed part of the world is the worst. They are bearing the brunt of the problem. Italy, Spain, France, Germany, UK, US, they are supposed to have the best of the health infrastructure in the world, but still they are grappling with the problem. The problem with coronavirus is twofold. One, since the virus is new, human beings don't have herd immunity. Herd immunity meaning people in general have immunity against the virus. For example, flu virus. Flu virus attack human beings every year. We get sick, but we recover. We don't die. Next year, the mutated form of virus attack yet again, and yet again we recover. The immune response against the flu virus is pretty strong because everyone is getting sick and everyone is also developing immunity against it. So even the mutated form of virus is tackled pretty easily. But since this coronavirus is new, as such it's not new. The virus is known to us from 1960s. But the present mutated form of virus is new because earlier there was no human to human transmission, but in the mutated form of the virus there is human to human transmission as well, and that's the problem. So this mutated form of virus is the new form of virus and we don't have herd immunity against it. Secondly, there is no specific therapy or vaccine available. The drug combination for other diseases cannot be given because the immune response is not very well known and the drug trial will take anywhere between 18 to 24 months. So it's going to take time, and that's the problem. The article offers the stages of development that the vaccination against coronavirus has gone through. But since still everything is at the trial stage, so it's not important to know the various researches at various universities that are happening. But still, some of the information you should know, for example, that back in January, China has already shared publicly the full RNA sequence of the virus, and that kick-started the development of vaccine against the coronavirus. And that is called as SARS-CoV-2. Because earlier then, the disease was having this name of SARS-CoV rather than COVID-19. And since then, by the collaboration of various universities and various countries, various trial drugs, the candidate drugs have been developed through various methods. For example, one of the methods involved is the delivering of viral genetic material, the DNA or the RNA. Or the other methods like developing of synthetic proteins will do. So various methods of vaccination all are being implemented in developing the vaccine against coronavirus. Even the Serum Institute of India has announced recently to be part of the drug trial. As per WHO, presently there are 20 vaccine candidates that are undergoing trial. And how many of them will be approved, that only time will tell. Since nothing is confirmed yet, we can only discuss the general problem in development of vaccines. That could be also important for the coming prelims exam. One of the major problems in development of vaccine is we do not know how the body is going to behave. Sometimes the immune system behaves very weirdly. And if there is a hyperimmune response, that will kill the body cell and hence the patients. Another aspect to be kept in mind is how long the acquired immunity in humans will last. Sometimes the acquired immunity lasts forever. For example, polio vaccine. The immunity against polio virus through polio vaccine is forever. But every time the vaccine is not forever. And if we are developing a vaccine for coronavirus that has created disaster of this magnitude, this has to be taken care. That provides permanent vaccination, that provides permanent immunity. And thirdly, can virus be effective even for the mutated virus? The present coronavirus is the mutated form of the earlier known coronavirus. Earlier known coronavirus were not human to human transferable. But the present coronavirus is transmitted human to human, and that's the mutated form. So another aspect that has to be taken care of, the vaccine that we are developing, that should cover for the mutated form of virus as well. Since the development of vaccines and drugs are going to take time, doctors are prescribing medications using the drugs that have already been approved. But this is creating more confusion. For instance, recently some doctors were giving the drug for malaria, for tackling the high fever in COVID-19. But this has not been approved by major medical institutions, and doctors have been asked to refrain from giving such a medication. Since so much of efforts are being put to develop vaccine and drug for COVID-19 that has created such a huge scale of disaster across the world, it should be taken care that safety of patients is ensured, the vaccine is long lasting, and it is also dealing with the mutated form of the virus. And the entire process through collaboration should be speeded up. So far, we have focused on the spread of coronavirus and development of vaccine and drugs for it. But gradually, we also have to shift our attention towards the financial, social, and emotional shock that the disease has caused globally and nationally, and the procedural and administrative measures that the government must adopt to mitigate such shocks. Today's newspaper is full with such kind of news. For example, on page number 10, it's mentioned government extends tax deadline to June 30th. The Chief Minister of Delhi has announced to give construction workers rupees 5,000 each. Migrant laborers left in lurch bear the brunt of the curb, the 21-day lockdown that has been announced. Traders hail centre's relief measures. There are certain relief measures taken by the central government that we will discuss shortly. Then there are other news on page number 3 like extend benefits of advocates welfare scheme. This scheme is of Delhi government for advocates of Delhi High Court who have domicile of Delhi. Not for everyone, but the extension of benefit to all advocates is being demanded. What we see is a lot is needed to be done because people are in problem across the spectrum, and the relief measures now will be appearing prominently in newspaper that you have to keep an eye on. Let's talk about the economic cost so far. According to estimates, the economic impact of lockdown on account of COVID-19 is around 9 lakh crore, around 4% of our GDP. And as per the estimate of UNCTAD, the economic loss to the world is pegged at 1 trillion US dollar. So in this context, Prime Minister has announced the formation of COVID-19 Economic Response Task Force in his address to the nation on 21st of March. However, the task force has not yet been constituted and the economic relief package has not yet been announced, but the finance minister has taken certain slew of measures. And these measures mostly aim to ease up the procedural and administrative hurdles dealing with income tax, customs, GST, insolvency and bankruptcy code, banking and commerce, etc. For example, let's see certain measures that has been taken. Under insolvency and bankruptcy code, currently if a firm defaults by a threshold of rupees 1 lakh, insolvency proceedings are initiated. But this threshold has been raised to rupees 1 crore, and this has been done mainly to save MSMEs, which are the largest employer after agriculture. In order to encourage digital payment, the users' charges have been reduced for digital transactions. Besides, the government has relaxed the condition of using the debit cards in ATMs. And also the minimum balance requirement has been relaxed. As we already saw that the government has extended the deadline for filing income tax and GST returns to 30th June. And the deadlines for the Vivad Se Vishwas, which is a scheme for the income tax related disputes, and Sabka Vishwas scheme related to GST for defaulting taxpayers has been extended. Sooner than later, some economic package has to come up because the problem that people are in is grave. And you have to keep an eye because news regarding this will start coming up in coming days. But what this should focus at? Obviously, the guidance, the guiding principle for such economic package has to be Sarvodaya through Antodaya, unto the last, the principle of Gandhiji. And one of the key area to focus on is the informal sector because lockdown has worst impacted the informal sector, the daily wage workers, and thus they need greater help. The stimulus should be oriented towards poor, unemployed, and vulnerable sections such as contractual daily wage laborers, construction workers, street vendors, etc. There are various numbers being put out by many experts, but one of the decent figure could be rupees 7,000 per month should be given to these vulnerable sections for at least 3 months. Regarding the implementation, one thing you should be aware of that recently the government started Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Man Dhan Yojana, and 43 lakh unorganized workers have registered under this scheme, and that is easy to identify. So identification of beneficiary can be done through this scheme and speedy dispersal of the money can be done. Migrant laborers are another very, very vulnerable sections. Many states including Punjab, Delhi, Maharashtra have extended the relief package to the construction workers. There is a special fund collected from the cess specially for the construction workers. And rupees 52,000 crore around is lying there in the fund, and there are altogether 4.4 crore registered construction workers. If you do the math, it will come around close to 12,000 rupees for each construction workers, and this amount can be disbursed. There is advisory given by the Union Labour Ministry to the state to give this sum of money into the accounts of the construction workers. Then there are sector-specific measures that the government has announced specifically for airlines, shipping, exporters, hotels and tourism. But however, large employers such as textiles and infrastructure, they should be prioritized. And food distribution should be done on priority, especially in coronavirus hotspot states, for example, Delhi and Punjab. And Delhi is doing good work in increasing the number of night shelters and providing free food to the homeless. But center can also support the states in this regard. We have come to the end of the discussion for today. Let's solve two questions based on what we have learned today. The first question is, consider the following statements with regard to virus. All viruses have outer lipid layer that protects them when they are outside the cell. Coronavirus have different structure than rotavirus. Virus is a non-living entity. You should really try this question out. If you get this wrong, then there is something really wrong. First statement is absolutely wrong. We have seen that there are two kind of viruses, enveloped virus and non-enveloped virus, and only enveloped virus has an outer lipid layer. Coronavirus is an enveloped virus. Rotavirus is not an enveloped virus. So statement number 2 is correct. Statement number 3 is obviously correct. We have seen that virus does not reproduce its own DNA. It changes the DNA of the host cell into its own DNA, and for that reason, it is considered as non-living entity. So statement number 2 and 3 are correct. Option B is the correct option. Second question says, in which of the following ways hand sanitizers protect against viral infection? Denaturation, dissolving the outer lipid layer, stressed mutation of the virus, dissolution of protective protein called capsid. Obviously, stressed mutation is far-fetched. You should remove option number 3 and you'll be left with two options, and ultimately you have to decide statement number 4 is correct or not. Dissolution of protective protein called capsid. This is not done. Actually, dissolution of the outer layer is done. There is nuclear material, then there is a protective layer of protein called capsid, and then there is an outer lipid layer. Outer lipid layer is dissolved and not the capsid. So this statement is incorrect. Statement number 1 and 2 are correct. Answer would be option A. Now let's see question for the day. Answer to the question of the day for yesterday is D. The question was, which among the following categories of bank are required to follow priority sector lending norms mandated by RBI? Commercial banks, regional rural banks, small finance banks, urban cooperative banks. And all of them are mandated to follow priority sector lending norms. Question for today is, consider the following statements regarding vaccine. Statement number 1, a vaccine is a biological preparation that provides active acquired immunity to a particular infectious disease. Statement number 2, a vaccine always contains disease-causing microorganisms. Your options are 1 only, 2 only, both 1 and 2, none of the above.